The moonlight streaming through the broken windows of Caldwell's abandoned dance hall caught her like silver fire, and Owen Andrews stopped dead in his tracks, certain he had stumbled upon something sacred. It was late spring in 1882, and the Idaho night carried the scent of sagebrush and distant pine through the rotting doorframe where he stood frozen, watching a woman move across the dusty floor with a grace that made his chest tighten. She wore a simple cotton dress the color of cream, now gray with dust at the hem, and her dark hair had come loose from its pins to fall in waves down her back. Her feet were bare, and she danced without music, turning and swaying to some melody only she could hear. Owen had been riding back to his small ranch after checking his cattle in the northern pastures when he noticed the faint glow of candlelight in the old hall. The building had been empty for 3 years, ever since the railroad bypassed Caldwell and most of the town's prosperity dried up like a creek in August. He should have announced himself. That would have been the proper thing to do. But something about the moment held him captive, something about the way she moved with her eyes closed, lost in her own world. She spun slowly, arms raised as though an invisible partner held her, and Owen felt like an intruder on someone's private prayer. The floorboards beneath his boots creaked. Her eyes flew open and she stumbled to a stop, one hand flying to her throat. They stared at each other across the empty space, and Owen watched the fear in her face shift to embarrassment, then something harder to name. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, pulling his hat from his head. "I saw the light and thought maybe someone was in trouble." She stood utterly still, breathing hard, studying him with eyes that caught the candlelight and threw it back. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 23 or 24, with a face more interesting than beautiful, all angles and intensity. There was something fierce in the set of her jaw that made Owen think of wild horses before they learned to trust. "You are from the town?" she asked. Her voice carried an accent he could not quite place, something European that softened her consonants. "I have a ranch about 5 miles north. Name is Owen Andrews." He took a step forward, still holding his hat. "I did not know anyone was using this place. I am not using it." She lowered her hand from her throat, but kept her shoulders squared, defensive. "I am only borrowing the space for a short time. I was not suggesting otherwise." Owen glanced around the hall, at the scattered candles she had placed along the edges of the room, at the old piano in the corner missing half its keys. "It is nice to see life in here again. This place used to be the heart of the town, back when we had enough people to fill it." Some of the tension left her posture. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly seeming aware of her bare feet and disheveled state. "I should not be here, I know this. But in town there are always people watching, always talking. Here I can think." Owen understood that feeling better than he could explain. He had spent the last 5 years building his ranch from nothing, working dawn to dusk, too tired most nights to think about the loneliness that crept in when he finally lay down to sleep. But it was there, constant as the Idaho wind. "Do not stop," he said, surprising himself. She tilted her head, puzzled. "What? You're dancing. It was beautiful. I did not mean to interrupt." He gestured vaguely with his hat. "I can leave if you want the privacy." For a long moment she just looked at him, weighing something internal. Then slowly she shook her head. "The moment is broken already, and I should return to town before my aunt worries. At least let me walk you back. It is not safe for a woman alone at night. I have managed this far." "I am sure you have," Owen said carefully. "But I would feel better knowing you got home safe. Call it the way I was raised." She studied him a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "Very well, but I need to collect my things." Owen waited by the door while she moved around the hall, snuffing out candles and gathering her shoes. She had a leather bag in the corner that she slung over one shoulder, and she tied her hair back with quick, efficient movements. Even these simple actions had a kind of grace to them that Owen found himself watching too closely. They walked out into the cool spring night, and she paused to lock the door with a key that she pulled from her pocket. Owen raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The road back to town wound through scrub brush and scattered cottonwoods, pale and ghostly in the moonlight. "You have a key to the hall?" he finally asked. "The mayor gave it to me. I clean the building twice a week, and in exchange he lets me use it when I wish." She glanced at him sideways. "You thought I broke in." "I did not say that. You thought it." But there was no anger in her voice, just a kind of weary amusement. "Everyone thinks things about me in this town. I am used to it by now." "What is your name?" Owen asked. She hesitated, then said, Petra Jensen." "How long have you been in Caldwell, Miss Jensen?" "6 months. I came to live with my aunt after my parents died." She said it flatly, without emotion, but Owen heard the pain underneath. He knew that particular kind of hurt, the one you learn to carry without showing. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." They walked in silence for a while, the only sound their footsteps on the packed dirt road and the distant cry of a coyote. Then Petra said, "You did not have to stay and watch me dance. Most men would have announced themselves right away or made some noise." Owen felt heat rise in his face, grateful for the darkness. "I know, it was wrong of me, but you looked so peaceful, and I have not seen anyone look peaceful in a long time, including myself." "Why not?" The question was so direct it caught him off guard. "I suppose because building a life from scratch is hard work, not much time for peace. But you chose this life." "I did," Owen agreed. "My father had a ranch in Montana, and I worked for him until I turned 21. Then I wanted to prove I could do it on my own, make something that was mine. Came down to Idaho 5 years ago and bought land that no one else wanted." He smiled at the memory. "It was a good price because it was half rock and twice stubborn." Petra laughed, a sound that surprised them both. "And you made it work anyway, more or less." "I run about 200 head of cattle now, mostly Herefords. It is not the biggest operation, but it is steady. Honest work. That is more than most people can say." There was something wistful in her voice that made Owen look at her more closely. "What about you? What did you do before you came here?" "I danced." She said it simply, as though it explained everything. "My mother was from Vienna, and she trained in ballet before she married my father and moved to America. She taught me from the time I could walk. When I was 18, I joined a company in San Francisco. We performed in theaters up and down the coast." Owen tried to picture it and could not quite manage it. His world was so far removed from theaters and cities, from the kind of life where people danced for audiences. "That must have been something. It was everything." Petra's voice caught slightly. "Then there was a fire. The theater we were performing in, it caught during a rehearsal. My mother had come to watch that day. She was visiting and she wanted to see the new production." She stopped walking and Owen stopped with her. "We got most people out, but the smoke, it was so thick. My mother went back in to help someone and never came out. My father, he had a heart attack when he heard the news. Within a month, I had lost them both and the theater and my company, everything." "Jesus," Owen breathed. "Miss Jensen, I am so sorry." She brushed at her eyes quickly. "My aunt wrote and said I could come stay with her. She is my father's sister, never married, works as a seamstress here in Caldwell. She is kind, but she does not understand why I need to dance. She thinks it is foolish, that I should forget that life and find a husband, settle down." Petra started walking again, faster now. "Everyone here thinks that. They look at me like I am strange, like there is something wrong with a woman who wants to move, who needs to create something with her body." Owen kept pace beside her, his mind working. Is that why you use the old hall, so no one sees you? Yes. In town, people stare. They whisper. I tried dancing in my aunt's house, but the space is too small and she frets about the neighbors. Petra glanced at him. You think I am foolish too? No, Owen said firmly. I think you are brave. You lost everything and you are still fighting to keep the part of yourself that matters most. That is not foolish. That is survival. She stopped again, turning to face him fully. In the moonlight, her face was all shadows and silver, and Owen felt something shift in his chest, some door he had kept carefully locked beginning to open. Thank you, Petra said quietly. You are the first person in this town to say something like that to me. They stood there on the empty road, looking at each other, and Owen felt the moment stretch and deepen. He wanted to say something more, but the words tangled in his throat. Finally, he cleared his throat and gestured toward town. We should keep moving. Your aunt will worry. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they reached the small house on the edge of town where Petra lived with her aunt, she turned to him with a smile that made his heart skip. Thank you for walking me home, Mr. Andrews. Owen, he said. Please, just Owen. Owen. She tried the name out, and he liked the way it sounded in her accented voice. Will you tell anyone about the hall? Not if you do not want me to. I would prefer to keep it private. Then that is where it stays. He put his hat back on and tipped it to her. Good night, Miss Jensen. Petra, she said, echoing his earlier request. Good night, Owen. He waited until she was inside before turning back toward where he had left his horse tied near the old hall. The walk back seemed longer than it should have, his mind full of images of Petra dancing alone in the candlelight, of the sadness in her eyes when she talked about her parents, of the fierceness with which she defended her need to dance. Owen had not expected to feel this way, this sudden rush of connection to a woman he had just met. For 5 years, he had focused on his ranch, on building something solid and lasting. There had been women, of course, but nothing that stuck, nothing that made him want to look beyond the next day's work. This felt different. This felt dangerous and necessary all at once. The following days passed in their usual rhythm of hard work and long hours, but Owen found his thoughts drifting to Petra more often than he cared to admit. He wondered if she went back to the hall, if she danced alone in the candlelight, if she thought about him at all. It seemed presumptuous to hope for that last one, but he hoped anyway. A week after their first meeting, Owen rode into Caldwell to pick up supplies from the general store. The town was small, just a main street with a dozen buildings clustered together like cattle seeking shelter. The general store stood next to the saloon, and across the street was the boarding house, the blacksmith, and a small building with a sign that read Jensen, seamstress. Owen tied his horse and went into the general store, trying not to look too obviously at the seamstress shop. He bought flour, coffee, beans, and ammunition, making small talk with Mr. Patterson, who ran the store and liked to gossip more than any woman Owen had ever met. You hear about the railroad? Patterson asked, weighing out the coffee beans. They are talking about putting in a spur line that might come through here after all, could bring the town back to life. I will believe it when I see it, Owen said. They have been talking about that for 3 years. This time sounds more serious. They are sending a surveyor next month. Patterson leaned across the counter, lowering his voice. Could mean real money coming back to Caldwell, maybe get the dance hall open again. Owen felt his pulse quicken at the mention of the hall. That would be something. Sure would. Remember how it used to be on Saturday nights. The whole town turned out. Patterson shook his head, nostalgic. Course, we would need someone who can play piano and maybe a few girls who can dance proper, not just the saloon girls. Owen thought of Petra, of the training she had mentioned, and an idea began to form in his mind. But before he could pursue it further, The door behind him opened and a woman's voice said, "Mr. Patterson, do you have the thread I ordered?" Owen turned and found himself face to face with Petra. She wore a practical brown dress with a white apron, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked different than she had in the moonlight, more grounded somehow, but her eyes lit with recognition when she saw him. "Owen," she said, sounding pleased, "I did not expect to see you in town." "Just picking up supplies," he said, acutely aware of Patterson watching them with interest. "How have you been?" "Well enough." She turned to Patterson. "The thread, right here, Miss Jensen." Patterson produced a small package from under the counter. "Your aunt said to put it on her account." "Thank you." Petra took the package, then hesitated, glancing at Owen. "Are you heading back to your ranch right away?" "I was planning to, but I am in no rush." "Would you have time for coffee? There is a cafe 2 doors down. I would like to talk to you about something." Owen's heart kicked against his ribs. "I would like that." Patterson's eyebrows rose with interest, but Owen ignored him, collecting his supplies and following Petra out into the bright morning sun. The cafe was small, just 4 tables and a counter, run by a Chinese man named Mr. Wang who made the best coffee in town. They settled at a table by the window, and Petra waited until Mr. Wang brought their cups before she spoke. "I wanted to thank you again for the other night," she said, wrapping her hands around her cup. "I have been thinking about what you said, about survival and keeping the part of myself that matters. I meant it. I know you did. I could tell." She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I have been in Caldwell for 6 months, and you are the first person who has treated my dancing as something real, something valuable. Everyone else acts like it is a hobby I should outgrow. Maybe they just do not understand it. Maybe." Petra set down her cup. "The truth is, I am going mad living here. My aunt means well, but she wants me to be someone I am not. She wants me to marry a local man, have children, forget about dancing. And part of me wonders if she is right, if I am holding on to something that is already dead." "Is that what you think?" Owen asked carefully. "No." The word came out fierce and certain. "When I dance, I feel alive. I feel connected to my mother, to everything I lost. I cannot explain it better than that." Owen leaned forward. "Then do not give it up, no matter what anyone says." "How?" Petra's eyes shone with frustration. "There are no companies here, no theaters, no one who cares about ballet in a town like Caldwell. I am dancing alone in an empty hall, and for what? It changes nothing." "Maybe it changes you," Owen said. "Maybe that is enough." Petra stared at him, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "How did you become so wise?" "I am not wise. I am just someone who knows what it is like to want something so badly you are willing to break yourself trying to get it." He thought about his ranch, the years of 18-hour days and constant worry. You do not give up the things that make you who you are. You find a way to make them fit. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Owen told her about his ranch, about the satisfaction of watching his cattle thrive, of building something with his own hands. Petra told him about Vienna, about her mother's stories of dancing in the great theaters of Europe, about the feeling of performing in front of an audience. "I miss that most," she admitted. "Not the applause, but the connection. When you dance for people and they understand what you are saying with your body, it is like sharing a piece of your soul." "I would like to see you dance properly sometime," Owen said, "not just glimpses in the moonlight." Petra's cheeks colored slightly. "Would you?" "Yes." She bit her lip, considering. "Come to the hall tonight around 8. I will dance for you if you want." "I want," Owen said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. They parted outside the cafe, and Owen rode back to his ranch with his mind spinning. He finished his chores in record time, washed up, changed into his one good shirt, and rode back to town as the sun set over the mountains. He reached the old hall just as the light was fading from the sky and found the door unlocked. Inside, Petra had transformed the space. She had swept the floor clean and placed candles everywhere, dozens of them, until the hall glowed with warm light. She stood in the center of the room, wearing the same cream-colored dress from before, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You came," she said, and there was relief in her voice as though she had not been certain he would. "I said I would." Owen closed the door behind him and moved to the edge of the room, giving her space. "You did not have to go to all this trouble. It is not trouble, it is preparation." She took a breath, settling herself. "I am going to dance a piece my mother choreographed. It is called The Wild Rose. It is about a flower growing in harsh soil, fighting to bloom despite everything trying to crush it." Owen felt the metaphor settle over him like a blanket. "I am ready." Petra closed her eyes, raised her arms, and began to move. This time, watching her was different. This time, she was performing for him, and Owen felt the weight of that gift. She moved across the floor with controlled power, her turns precise, her leaps impossibly high. There was a story in every gesture, a narrative of struggle and perseverance. When she extended her arms, Owen saw the flower reaching for sunlight. When she bent low to the ground, he saw it weathering a storm. The dance built to a crescendo, Petra spinning faster and faster until Owen thought she might fly apart, and then suddenly she froze, balanced on one leg, arms extended like petals open to the sky. She held the position for a long moment, and Owen forgot to breathe. When she finally relaxed and lowered her arms, Owen realized he was gripping the brim of his hat so hard his knuckles had gone white. He stood slowly and, without thinking about it, began to applaud. Petra's face broke into a radiant smile. She was breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion, and she looked more beautiful than anything Owen had ever seen. "That was incredible," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Petra, that was just incredible." She walked over to him, still catching her breath. "You really think so? I have never seen anything like it in my life." Owen wanted to reach for her but kept his hands at his sides. "Your mother must have been an amazing dancer." "She was." Petra's eyes glistened with tears. "She would have liked you, I think." She always said the best audiences were the ones who understood that dance is not entertainment, it is communication. "I felt like you were telling me something," Owen admitted. "I am not educated enough to put it into words, but I felt it. That is all that matters." Petra reached out and touched his arm just briefly, but the contact sent electricity through Owen's entire body. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me." They stood close together in the candlelit hall, and Owen knew he should leave, should put distance between them before he did something foolish. But he could not make himself move. Instead, he heard himself ask, "Would you teach me?" Petra blinked. "Teach you what? To dance?" "Not like what you just did. I am not graceful enough for that. But regular dancing, the kind people do at socials." He felt his face heat. "I never learned properly, and I always felt like a fool at gatherings." She looked delighted by the idea. "You want me to teach you to dance?" "If you are willing, I can pay you for lessons." "I do not want your money," Petra said firmly, "but I would be happy to teach you. It would be nice to have a purpose again, even a small one." So began an arrangement that transformed both their lives. 3 evenings a week, Owen rode into Caldwell and met Petra at the old hall. She taught him the basic steps, the waltz and the polka and the two-step, patient with his mistakes and encouraging when he got something right. Owen had never considered himself a dancer, but with Petra guiding him, it began to make sense. She was a natural teacher, breaking down the movements into pieces he could understand. "Dancing is just listening," she explained one evening, holding his hand as she showed him how to lead. You listen to the music, you listen to your partner, you listen to your own body. When all three are in harmony, that is when the magic happens. Owen was listening, but not just to the music. He was listening to the sound of Petra's laughter when he stepped on her toes, to the way her breath caught when he spun her correctly, to the comfortable silences that fell between them during breaks. He was falling in love with her, he realized. Not the sudden, desperate kind of love, but the slow, steady kind that grew deeper every day. He thought Petra might be feeling it too. He caught her watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. She started touching him more casually, a hand on his shoulder to adjust his posture, fingers lingering in his when they danced. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. One evening in late June, they were practicing a waltz when Petra stumbled, and Owen caught her automatically, pulling her close to steady her. She looked up at him, and time seemed to stop. They were standing so close Owen could count her eyelashes, could feel the warmth of her breath on his neck. "Petra," he said, his voice low, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She did not pull away. "I think I am falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, unpolished and honest. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months, and I know you have dreams bigger than anything Caldwell can offer. But I had to tell you. You are the most remarkable person I have ever met, and being with you makes me feel alive in a way I never have before." Petra's eyes widened, and for a terrible moment, Owen thought he had ruined everything. Then she smiled, slow and beautiful, and reached up to touch his face. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to because I am afraid. I am afraid that if I let myself want you, I will lose you like I lost everything else. You will not lose me." Owen covered her hand with his own. "I am not going anywhere. You cannot promise that." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I can promise I will fight like hell to stay." He took a breath. "I want to court you properly, Petra. I want to take you to dinners, introduce you around as my girl, show everyone in this town how proud I am to be with you." "They will talk," Petra warned. "They already think I am strange. Let them talk." "I do not give a damn what anyone thinks," Owen smiled. "Besides, once they get to know you, they will understand." Petra laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "You really mean this?" "Every word." She stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet, and Owen felt the last piece of himself fall completely, irrevocably in love. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Petra rested her forehead against his chest. "I have to tell my aunt," she said. "She will have opinions." "I will come with you if you want." "Not yet. Let me talk to her first, prepare her." Petra looked up at him. "She is protective of me. She will want to make sure you are serious." "I am serious as a heart attack," Owen said, and made Petra laugh again. The next few weeks were both wonderful and complicated. Petra's aunt, Petra Jensen, was indeed protective, and she interrogated Owen with a thoroughness that would have impressed a lawyer. She wanted to know about his finances, his prospects, his intentions toward her niece. Owen answered every question honestly, and eventually Hannah's stern expression softened into something like approval. "You seem like a decent man," she said finally. "But my niece is special. She has been through too much pain already. If you hurt her, you will have me to answer to." "Yes, madam," Owen said respectfully. "I have no intention of hurting her." "Intention and action are not always the same thing," Hannah said sharply, "but I suppose we will see." With Hannah's grudging blessing, Owen began courting Petra openly. He took her to dinner at the boarding house restaurant, to church on Sundays, to the county fair in early August. Caldwell was too small for their relationship to go unnoticed, and as Petra had predicted, people talked. Some of the comments were kind, but others were less so. Owen heard whispers about Petra being strange, too educated, too foreign. It made his blood boil, but Petra took it in stride. "Let them talk," she said, echoing his earlier words. "They do not know me, and I do not need them to." But Owen could see the comments hurt her, no matter how brave she acted. He wished he could do something to make the town see her the way he did, to understand her value. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. In mid-August, the railroad surveyor came to town, and with him came the news that the spur line was definitely coming through Caldwell. The announcement sent a wave of excitement through the small community. Businesses started planning expansions, and the mayor called a town meeting to discuss how to prepare for the influx of people and commerce that would follow. Owen attended the meeting with Petra at his side, and listened as the mayor outlined his vision for Caldwell's rebirth. When he mentioned reopening the dance hall, Owen saw his chance. He stood up, ignoring Petra's startled look. "Mayor Thompson," he said, "I think reopening the hall is a fine idea, but it will need someone to run it, someone who knows about dancing and entertainment." The mayor nodded. "I am open to suggestions, Mr. Andrews. I would like to suggest Miss Petra Jensen." Owen felt Petra grab his arm, but he kept going. "Some of you might not know this, but Miss Jensen trained in professional ballet in San Francisco. She performed in theaters up and down the coast before she came to Caldwell. She has more knowledge about dance in her little finger than most of us have in our whole bodies." The room erupted in murmurs, some interested, some skeptical. Hannah Jensen looked shocked. Petra looked like she wanted to either kiss Owen or kill him, possibly both. "That is quite a suggestion," Mayor Thompson said slowly. "Miss Jensen, is this true?" Petra stood, her hand still gripping Owen's arm. "It is true that I trained in ballet, yes. And I performed with a company for several years. But can you teach regular folks?" Someone called from the back. "No offense, miss, but most of us do not need ballet. We just need to know how to waltz without breaking our partner's toes." Laughter rippled through the crowd, good-natured but pointed. Petra lifted her chin. "I can teach anyone who wants to learn. Ballet is the foundation of all dance. If you understand the basics of movement, posture, and rhythm, you can learn any style." "Prove it," another voice called. It was Samuel Winters, who owned the saloon and had never been particularly friendly to newcomers. "Show us what you can do." Owen tensed, ready to defend Petra, but she squeezed his arm and stepped forward. "Very well, but I will need music." "I can play," Mrs. Patterson offered. She was the storekeeper's wife and played organ at the church. "If someone can get me to the hall." Within 20 minutes, the entire town meeting had relocated to the old dance hall. Someone lit the lamps, and Mrs. Patterson sat down at the battered piano, testing keys until she found enough that worked. Petra stood in the center of the floor, looking small and alone in front of the crowd, and Owen's heart ached for her. "What should I play?" Mrs. Patterson called. "A waltz," Petra said. "Something simple." Mrs. Patterson began to play a melody Owen recognized from church socials, and Petra began to dance. Not the wild, artistic movements she had shown Owen in private, but something more accessible. A basic waltz done with such perfect technique that it looked effortless. She turned and glided across the floor, her arms graceful, her posture perfect, and the crowd fell silent, watching when Mrs. Patterson finished. There was a moment of silence, and then applause broke out. Petra flushed with pleasure, but she was not done. "Now," she said, "I need a volunteer. Someone who does not know how to dance well." A dozen hands shot up, including several young men who clearly just wanted an excuse to hold Petra's hand. She scanned the crowd and pointed to Mr. Patterson, the gossipy storekeeper who had 2 left feet, and everyone knew it. "Mr. Patterson, would you help me?" Patterson looked terrified but came forward, urged on by his laughing neighbors. Petra took his hand gently and positioned him correctly. "Just follow my lead and listen to the music, Mrs." Patterson started playing again, and Petra began to guide Patterson through the steps. She was patient and clear, calling out the rhythm and adjusting his posture when needed. To everyone's amazement, including Patterson's, he began to get it. He still looked awkward, but he was actually dancing, moving in time to the music and not stepping on Petra's feet. When they finished, the applause was louder and Patterson was beaming. "I will be damned," he said. "I never thought I could do that." "Anyone can learn," Petra said. "It just takes the right teacher." After that, the tide turned. People came forward to ask questions, to express interest in lessons. The mayor pulled Petra aside to discuss terms for reopening the hall, and Owen stood back and watched her come alive, watched her transform from the lonely woman dancing in the shadows to someone the town wanted, needed. Later, walking Petra home under the stars, Owen felt her lean against him, tired but happy. "I cannot believe you did that," she said. "I thought I was going to faint when you stood up. I am sorry, I should have asked you first." "No," she shook her head. "If you had asked, I would have said no. I would have been too afraid. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself." "I always will," Owen promised. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. The railroad company began construction on the spur line, and Caldwell transformed almost overnight. New businesses opened, new families moved in, and the town that had been dying suddenly felt alive again. Petra threw herself into reopening the dance hall, cleaning and repairing the space with help from Owen and a dozen volunteers. She started offering lessons 3 evenings a week, teaching everything from basic social dances to more advanced techniques for those who showed interest. The classes were popular, especially among the young people, and Petra glowed with purpose. She hired Mrs. Patterson to play piano, and together they turned the hall into the social center of Caldwell once again. Owen watched her flourish and fell more in love with her every day. They stole moments together whenever they could, walking by the river, sharing meals, dancing together in the empty hall after everyone else had gone home. In September, when the aspen trees turned gold in the mountains, Owen decided he could not wait any longer. He bought a ring from a jeweler in Boise, a simple gold band with a small diamond, the best he could afford. On a Saturday evening, after Petra's last class had ended and the hall was empty, he took her hand and led her to the center of the floor. "Dance with me," he said. Petra smiled, tired but happy. "We just spent 3 hours dancing." "I know, dance with me anyway." She laughed and stepped into his arms. They moved together without music, just the sound of their own breathing and footsteps, and Owen thought about how far they had both come. 2 lost people finding each other in the darkness, learning to trust again, learning to hope. "Petra," he said, stopping their movement, "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You make me want to be better, braver, more open to the world. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." She was looking at him with wide eyes, already guessing what was coming. Owen pulled out the ring, his hands shaking slightly, and dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me?" Petra's hands flew to her mouth, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Owen, yes." He stood and slipped the ring on her finger, and she threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with a passion that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Owen held her close and thought about the night he had stumbled upon her dancing alone. If he had turned away then, if he had not stopped to watch, his whole life would be different, smaller, emptier. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For not stopping. for keeping that part of yourself alive even when it was hard, for letting me see you." Petra pulled back to look at him, and her smile was radiant. "Thank you for watching. Thank you for telling me not to stop." They were married in October, on a crisp fall day with the mountains blazing with color. Hannah Jensen cried through the entire ceremony, though whether from happiness or worry Owen could not tell. Half the town attended, cramming into the little church, and afterward there was a reception at the dance hall that lasted until midnight. Petra wore a cream-colored dress that her aunt had made, and Owen wore his best suit, and they danced together as man and wife while everyone cheered. The next morning they rode out to Owen's ranch, which was now their ranch. Petra looked around at the land with new eyes, seeing it not as a visitor but as someone who belonged there. Owen had spent the past month making improvements to the small house, adding a room and fixing the roof, doing everything he could to make it comfortable for her. "It is not fancy," he said, suddenly nervous. "I know you are used to cities and theaters." "It is perfect," Petra said firmly. She walked through the rooms, touching things, claiming the space as her own. "This is ours. That makes it perfect." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Owen continued working the ranch, and Petra continued teaching at the hall 3 evenings a week. They developed a rhythm, each supporting the other's work and dreams. On Sundays, they would ride together to check the cattle, and Petra learned about ranching with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. Owen attended every one of her classes, helping where he could and marveling at her ability to inspire people. In the spring of 1883, Petra discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They had been married less than 6 months, and suddenly, the future felt both more real and more precious. Petra continued teaching as long as she could, finally stopping in her 7th month when her balance became uncertain. Their son was born on a snowy December morning, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Daniel, after Owen's father, and the moment Owen held his son for the first time, he understood a new kind of love entirely. Petra was radiant despite her exhaustion, holding Daniel close and singing to him in German, songs her mother had sung to her. The first year of Daniel's life was exhausting and wonderful. They took turns walking him when he cried at night, and Owen discovered he was quite good at changing diapers, something that made Petra laugh. She slowly returned to teaching, bringing Daniel with her to the hall, and the students loved having a baby around. In the summer of 1884, Petra approached Owen with an idea. "I want to start teaching children," she said. "There are so many young people in Caldwell now with the railroad, and they should have the chance to learn proper dance if they want to." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Owen said. So Petra started offering classes for children on Saturday mornings, teaching basic ballet and movement to girls and boys from age 6 and up. The classes were immediately popular, and soon she had more students than she could handle. She hired 2 assistants, young women she trained herself, and the dance program became one of the most respected in the region. Years passed in a blur of work and joy, challenges and growth. Owen expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land and increasing his herd. Petra's dance program grew, and students came from towns miles away to study with her. In 1886, they had a daughter, Sarah, who inherited her mother's grace and her father's steady temperament. 2 years later came another son, Thomas, who was wild and fearless and kept them constantly busy. Through it all, Owen and Petra remained each other's anchor. They still danced together on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, moving through their home with the ease of long practice. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Owen never stopped being amazed by his wife's strength and creativity. In 1890, when Caldwell celebrated the completion of its new train depot, the town held a grand ball at the dance hall. Petra choreographed a special performance featuring her most advanced students, and Owen watched from the audience with tears in his eyes as his wife took the stage one final time before retiring from performing for good. She was 31 years old and still as beautiful as the day he first saw her dancing alone in the moonlight. After the performance, Owen found her backstage, flushed with triumph. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Just incredible." "That felt like saying goodbye," Petra admitted, "to that part of my life." "Are you sad?" She thought about it, then shook her head. "No, I am grateful. I got to dance professionally and I got to teach, and now I get to watch my students carry it forward. That is more than I ever expected after the fire." She looked up at him. "And I have you and our children. That is worth everything." They danced together that night, moving slowly around the floor while the band played and their friends and neighbors celebrated around them. Owen thought about the long road they had traveled together, all the ways they had changed and grown. He thought about the scared, lonely woman he had found dancing in an abandoned hall and the confident, beloved teacher she had become. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying in Caldwell instead of going back to the cities, to the big theaters?" "Never," Petra said without hesitation. "This is my home. You are my home." "I love you," Owen said. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond that if I can manage it." Petra laughed and kissed him. "I will hold you to that promise." The children grew. Daniel became a rancher like his father, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Owen aged. Sarah shocked everyone by becoming a doctor, one of the first women physicians in Idaho. Thomas moved to Boise and opened a saddle shop that became famous across the state. They all married, had children of their own, and brought those children back to the ranch for holidays and summers. Petra continued teaching until she was 65, training hundreds of students over the decades. Several of her dancers went on to perform professionally, and they all credited her with giving them the foundation they needed. When she finally retired in 1909, the town held a celebration in her honor, renaming the hall the Jensen Dance Hall in recognition of her contributions to Caldwell. Owen and Petra spent their later years in comfortable routine, still living on the ranch but with more help from their children. They took long walks in the evenings, holding hands like young lovers, and they still danced together when the mood struck them, though more slowly now, their movements careful and deliberate. On a spring evening in 1917, when Owen was 63 and Petra was 61, they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over the mountains. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, and the sound of their laughter drifted on the warm air. "I have been thinking," Petra said, leaning against Owen's shoulder, "about that first night when you found me in the hall." "I think about that night all the time," Owen admitted. "What would have happened if you had not stopped? If you had just walked by, or if you had announced yourself right away instead of watching?" Owen considered the question seriously. "I do not know. Maybe we still would have met eventually, Caldwell being so small, but maybe not. Maybe I would have missed the most important moment of my life." "I am glad you stopped," Petra said softly. "I am glad you watched, and I am glad you told me not to stop dancing. You saved my life that night, even though I did not know I needed saving." "You saved mine too," Owen said. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Everything good in my life started that night." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. In the yard, their grandchildren chased fireflies, and from inside the house came the sound of their daughter Sarah preparing dinner. It was an ordinary moment, beautiful in its simplicity, and Owen felt a rush of gratitude so strong it almost overwhelmed him. He had never been a religious man, but in that moment, he sent up a prayer of thanks to whatever force had led him to that abandoned dance hall on a spring night 35 years ago. He thought about all the choices, all the small moments that had led to this life, this love, this contentment. If any single thing had been different, he might have missed it all. "Do you want to dance?" Petra asked, as if reading his thoughts. Owen stood and pulled her gently to her feet. "Always." They moved together on the porch, swaying slowly to music only they could hear, and Owen knew with absolute certainty that every choice he had ever made had been worth it to reach this moment. Every hard day on the ranch, every challenge, every moment of doubt had led him here, to this woman, to this life they had built together. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," Petra whispered back. "Thank you for watching me dance. Thank you for everything." They held each other close as the stars came out one by one. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and spent a lifetime bringing light into the world together. In the distance, a coyote called, its voice echoing across the Idaho hills, a sound as old as the land itself, a sound of wildness and freedom and home. Owen Andrews died peacefully in his sleep in 1924 at the age of 70, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. Petra held his hand until the very end, and when he took his last breath, she leaned down and whispered in his ear, "Dance with me in the next life, my love. Do not stop." Petra lived another 5 years, teaching the occasional class at the hall that bore her name, spending time with her ever-growing family, and dancing alone in the evenings when the mood struck her. She never remarried, always saying that she had already lived a lifetime of love and could not imagine trying to find that magic twice. On the evening before she died, she asked Daniel to take her to the old dance hall one last time. He drove her into town, confused but willing, and helped her inside. She stood in the center of the floor where she had first met Owen, where they had fallen in love, where they had built something beautiful together. "What are we doing here, Mother?" Daniel asked gently. Petra smiled, her eyes distant with memory. "I am remembering," she said. "I am saying thank you, and I am getting ready to dance again." She died that night in her sleep, a peaceful expression on her face, and at her funeral, her students and grandchildren performed a tribute dance in her honor. The whole town came out to mourn and celebrate the woman who had brought art and grace to their community, who had proven that dreams could survive even in the hardest circumstances, who had lived a life of passion and purpose. They buried her next to Owen on the hill overlooking their ranch, and on her headstone her children inscribed the words that had started it all. She danced, and he told her not to stop, and from that moment everything changed. The ranch stayed in the Andrews family for generations, as did the dance hall in town. Petra's great-granddaughter eventually took over running the dance program, teaching new generations the techniques and artistry that Petra had brought from Vienna through San Francisco to a small town in Idaho. Students still learned about Petra Jensen Andrews, the woman who had transformed a dying town through the power of dance, and about Owen Andrews, the cowboy who had seen something precious in the darkness and had the wisdom not to look away. Their love story became local legend, passed down through families, a reminder that the most important moments in life often come when you least expect them, that watching and listening can be acts of love, that telling someone not to stop being themselves might be the greatest gift you can give. Children growing up in Caldwell learned about the night a lonely rancher stumbled upon a grieving dancer and changed both their lives forever. And they understood that true love is not about grand gestures, but about seeing someone truly and choosing to stay. The old dance hall still stands in Caldwell, Idaho, carefully preserved and still in use. On quiet nights, people swear they can hear music drifting from inside, and the sound of two people dancing together, their footsteps perfectly in sync, their movements a conversation without words. Some say it is just the wind or the old building settling, but those who believe in love, in the persistence of beautiful things, know better. They know it is Owen and Petra, still dancing together in the space where they first met, still telling their story to anyone willing to stop and listen. Because some loves are too strong to be contained by a single lifetime, some connections too deep to be severed by something as simple as death. They dance on in memory and legend, in the students who still learn in that hall, in the couples who fall in love while learning to waltz, in everyone who has ever been brave enough to keep being themselves even when the world told them to stop. And sometimes, on spring nights when the moon is bright and the air smells of sagebrush, if you walk past that old hall in Caldwell, you might catch a glimpse through the window of a woman dancing alone in the shadows, moving with impossible grace, lost in her own world. And if you stop to watch, if you stand quietly and let yourself be drawn into the beauty of the moment, you might hear a voice, rough with emotion and deep with love, saying two simple words that changed everything. Do not stop.